Welcome back, everyone. Episode 22, Guidance. So the episode starts off with Ryuzaki looking like he's kind of zoned out. I'm not really sure how to describe this look he has on his face right now. It's clear that he's in his own head though, given the fact that we can see Misa talking in the background despite being unable to actually hear what she's saying. Anyway, the moment doesn't last too long before we get some insight into what he's thinking.
I knew Amane would do almost anything for Light, but to think that she would actually go this far?
And I get where he's coming from. That was a lot. Though to us, it's not that surprising. She's expressed time and time again that she'd do anything for this guy.
And if I become a burden to you, then you can just kill me, okay? I already told you, I don't care even if all you do is use me. And besides, I would gladly die if it were for you, Light.
And hell, that last one was said in front of Ryuzaki, so he really shouldn't be that surprised. But I guess one could argue that it's one thing to say those things and another to willingly put yourself at risk the way that she did. Anyway, he goes on to say that even if Higuchi does stop killing, which would be proof that he is actually Kira, there's still one crucial element that they'd still be unable to figure out.
How Kira conducts his murders.
And that's true. Him not killing is not quite as beneficial to the investigation as it would be if he were to continue killing. Well, at least not from Ryuzaki's point of view. Anyway, his internal monologue ultimately ends with him saying that he needs to figure out a plan to unearth how Kira kills. From there, we switch our focus to Light and Misa, as he questions her on how exactly she managed to get Higuchi to confess. And she goes on to tell the truth, claiming he's thirsty as hell, and she used that to her advantage by telling him that she'd marry him if he was Kira. Interestingly enough, she also adds,
Plus, I managed to convince him that I'm the second Kira.
Which, I will say, it was smart on her part to preemptively throw that out there.
If I didn't say this now, I'd probably end up contradicting my story later.
Because, yeah, that wouldn't be good at all. But to be honest, she would still run into an issue if he's alive to talk after he's apprehended, because eventually they'd question him about that whole situation. And I mean, as it stands, it's a crucial piece of evidence as to why he's Kira. And does she think he's just not gonna mention what happened with Genzo Kaneboshi? Like, I imagine that recording she made has a timestamp, and I imagine that timestamp is, at most, a few minutes after Kaneboshi died. And then there's the matter of Higuchi's phone records, which would confirm that he made a call to Kaneboshi at around the same time, which could help bolster his argument that he was confirming that she did actually kill him. I mean, it would be one thing if she told them now that Higuchi killed Kaneboshi to prove to her that he was Kira, but since she didn't take that route, she's potentially opening herself up for Higuchi to screw her over by telling them how it actually went down. But anyway, Light goes off on her, which, okay, I can understand. He's worried that something could have happened, or hell, that something will happen to her. But I mean, she did just make your case and saved y'all a lot of trouble in regards to figuring out which of those 7 men were Kira. So, I mean, dial it back a bit, okay? And, to digress for just a second, there's this moment where Watari walks in with some sweets, and I'm thinking, does Misa know that this is the man that tortured her? Like, I have to imagine she doesn't, because if she did, then that's insane that she has absolutely no reaction to it. Like, I could somewhat understand her not having an issue with Ryuzaki since he didn't actually perform the torture, but man, you can't tell me that she's just unfazed being in the same room as the dude who did all kinds of crazy shit to her. Like, come on now. But anyway, Light ends up mirroring Ryuzaki's sentiment regarding Higuchi, claiming that preventing the deaths will help in regard to proving that Higuchi is Kira, but if he does stop killing, then they won't be able to figure out how he's doing it. Which leaves them with a bit of a conundrum. How can they figure out how he kills without him actually killing anyone? And that's not something they have an answer to. Well, not yet anyway. So Ryuzaki ends up reaching out to Weddy, and when her alias popped up, I had the sudden realization that both she and Watari have names that begin with the letter W, but their W's look different. I'm guessing this is supposed to be a lowercase w or something? Not important or anything, just something I happened to notice. But yeah, Ryuzaki asks how she's doing in regard to installing cameras and wiretaps, and she says that everything is going smoothly, before listing off some information in regard to how much she's progressed within the main Yotsuba office, as well as each of the 7 members' homes. Ryuzaki then asks about Higuchi specifically, which prompts Weddy to say,
He recently constructed a dampening room that shuts out any electronic waves. It took me 2 days just to break into the place.
And it's kind of interesting hearing her describe Higuchi's level of security in comparison to, say, her experience with the Yotsuba group's main office, where she stated that
Security level here is a joke.
Also, where is Weddy? Like, this place looks super high-tech, but I imagine she's not in the building with them. I mean, it's somewhat reminiscent of Watari's control room in the sense that there's a lot of tech, but it also looks extremely compact. Not to mention the fact that her motorcycle is right next to what I imagine is her desk. Is this a van or a trailer or something? I mean, it wouldn't be too surprising. It's not like they couldn't afford it, especially with the Yotsuba group throwing all kinds of money at them. But still, this is a wild-ass setup that she's got going on here. Anyway, upon hearing this, Ryuzaki tells her to forget about trying to access the house and instead tells her to focus on installing microphones, trackers, and cameras in all 6 of Higuchi's cars. And this actually kind of irritates her a little.
What? After getting this far?
But she ultimately complies before ending the call. However, it's worth pointing out that we do get this moment from Misa.
If Higuchi had been bugged earlier, I would have been in big trouble.
And yeah, she's right. Old girl would have been absolutely screwed. But it looks like she has a god on her side after all. And not just a god. I'm sorry, I couldn't do it.
Light, I'm sorry to keep coming back to this topic. I'll just get right to the point.
So I love the delivery of this line. Like, without even knowing what he's going to say, with the energy he's giving off, you just know it's going to be something to piss Light off.
Do you remember killing anyone, I mean?
And I love how direct this question is. Like, let me not waste anyone's time by being coy about it. You know, I know, everyone knows that I think you're Kidda, so why even beat around the bush? Instead, just, like, tell me, do you remember any of the people you killed when you were Kidda? And it's just, if I were Light, I'd be like, what the hell do you want me to say to that, man? Like, I told your ass that I'm not Kidda, and you want to keep coming at me with this disrespect. And while he doesn't say it quite like that, he does respond with,
Are you still going on about that? Look, I'm not Kidda. How many times do
I just want you to answer the question.
And honestly, I cannot stand when people do shit like that. Ryuzaki's like, I just asked a question, man. Settle down. Knowing damn well that shit was going to trigger him. But that being said, I also can appreciate the fact that at the end of the day, Ryuzaki could not care less about how this man feels about his questions. So whatever. Anyway, Light responds coldly with,
No, I don't.
Before Ryuzaki then poses the same question to Misa, who gives a convincing response of,
I don't remember. How could I? 'Cause I'm not Kidda.
which really is only a half lie. She's aware that she was the second Kidda, but she doesn't actually remember killing anyone. Anyway, Ryuzaki, well, he basically tells Light to leave his emotions at the door for this next part, which honestly isn't a completely unreasonable request. Because the thing is, Ryuzaki needs someone on his intellectual level to help him analyze his theory. And if Light's going to take it personally, which, I mean, to be fair, he's not wrong for doing, but if he does take it personally, then it'll only hinder Ryuzaki's ability to think through how they can best go about catching Higuchi. So, in understanding that, Light begrudgingly agrees to set his emotions aside and hear Ryuzaki out. And so, Ryuzaki goes on to explain his theory.
Light Yagami used to be Kira. Kira's power has somehow passed on to another person. Was that because Light Yagami wanted it to happen? Or was there someone else in control of Light, lurking in the background, who gave him the power? Was it that person who passed Light's powers to someone else?
And thus the question is left up to Light to answer. And it's important to note that he takes 13 seconds to respond. 13 seconds of just silence following Ryuzaki laying that all out. And that silence speaks volumes, especially when it's followed by him finally saying,
Given your premise, it would be my will.
Because it's the first time he's actually come out and said something like that. For the last few episodes, he's adamantly denied any notion of him possibly having been Kidda. The closest we've gotten was during his moments of introspection where his resolve wavered, where he'd come close to giving into this idea that he might have been Kidda. But every time that happened, without fail, he would reel himself back in and convince himself that there's just no way. But not here. In taking his emotions out of the equation, the answer becomes crystal clear. And I imagine that's tough as hell to admit to not only Ryuzaki, not only his father and the other task force members, but to himself. It's a lot, and I really like the way they frame this scene. Now, in addition to that, Ryuzaki's speech was also super interesting from a visual and auditory standpoint. Starting with the visuals, the scene played out similarly to episode 8, with Light munching on his potato chips, with all its dramatic cuts back and forth between Ryuzaki and Light, with things like apples and demonic creatures spliced in for good measure. But I think what made it even more intense was the way in which L's A theme was blaring in the background. I especially like it because the theme was already playing when Ryuzaki was talking to Light earlier. However, just before Ryuzaki begins explaining his theory, it pauses for like a second or two, only to come back louder and more intense than it was previously.
Light Yagami used to be Kira.
I really fucked with that transition. And there's another one that comes in a few minutes that's also pretty awesome, but we'll get to that in a second. So Ryuzaki agrees with Light's answer, claiming that if there is a third party out there secretly pulling the strings, so to speak, then it wouldn't make sense for them to wait so long to transfer the power, especially if they didn't want anyone to find out about Kira's power. The idea of this other entity waiting until Light was captured, waiting a week after Light was captured before finally transferring the power to someone else just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can't even really argue for a specific waiting period either, because Misa forfeited ownership 3 days into her incarceration, meaning that's when she started exhibiting strange behavior, whereas Light did so after a full week, so there'd be an inconsistency with how long said waiting period actually is. Meaning it makes more sense that they both voluntarily gave it up as opposed to it being done by some other entity. Though, interestingly enough, it was Rim who told Misa to give up her death note, so yeah. Anyway, Ryuzaki continues his monologue, and I wanted to take note of this moment.
If we believe that this was the work of some being watching us from above, then we'd have to accept that they are impossible to catch.
I love the use of these visuals in combination with what he's saying about some entity watching over them, as well as said entity being impossible to catch. This viewpoint of the cityscape masterfully illustrates those thoughts, both the idea of being watched from above, as well as the overwhelming vastness of just a portion of this single city, and the idea that this entity could be anywhere, that it could have the ability to possess anyone at any time, and even if you do wind up catching them, they can just send the power away over and over again. I just feel like it's a really great way of conveying that message. But yeah, in having Light confirm his theory, Ryuzaki turns to him and says,
"Thank you. I can now say that I feel 99% better."
Just as we switch to L's B theme. And again, the way it goes from silence to the music starting up just works so well. It really serves to help you feel the change in energy coming from Ryuzaki after having his theory validated. And not just having it validated by someone he thinks of as his intellectual equal, but also the fact that it's coming from Light specifically, the man he knows was previously Kira. It's all just so awesome, honestly. But anyway, Ryuzaki then goes on to say,
"We'll create a situation where Higuchi will not be able to pass on his power. We'll have him show us how he kills."
Before going on to explain that they're going to use Sakura TV. You might remember them from episodes 10 and 11. They're the station run by that dude Demigawa. Well, apparently they have a weekly program dedicated to all things Kira, which, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. I imagine if Kira was around today, they'd be mentioned on the news pretty frequently. And don't even get me started on the number of YouTubers and streamers that would have a field day with using Kira as content. Hell, I'm doing it right now. But yeah, Ryuzaki's plan is to have them air a special segment wherein they'll claim that Kira's identity will be revealed.
Would anyone actually buy that though? This is Sakura TV after all.
Which, the way he puts it, it feels like Sakura TV is about as credible a news station as, say, something like TMZ. Anyway, Light ends up responding to Matsuda, telling him that they'll just use Namikawa and have him tell Higuchi,
"This is bad. Turn on your TV. That should be enough to get him watching."
Which is an effective way to make use of Namikawa since they have him in their back pocket. Light goes on to say that even if he does blow it off at first, he'll take it seriously once he realizes that it's someone who actually seems to know shit about who the members of the group are, prompting Matsuda to say,
"Oh, I get it. So we'll be using Iber then."
Which, I mean, I could see why you'd say that. Iber has gotten close to them, even meeting Higuchi in person, but Ryuzaki ultimately shuts that down, claiming that it needs to be someone that Higuchi thinks he can kill, and given the fact that Iber has been using an alias this whole time, it wouldn't make sense to have him be the one to do it. I mean, what name would Higuchi even try to write down? Eraldo Coil? I mean, that's obviously an alias, so it can't be him.
In other words, it has to be someone whose name he can look up easily.
And if the framing of this wasn't making it obvious enough, they all just come right out and say it for our boy.
"You're the only one who can do it."
Matsu!
Well, I guess not all of them. Mogi's gone back to being a wallflower. I know you can speak, Mogi. Anyway, Matsuda's like, what the fuck? But, I mean, when they break the entire plan down, it really does make the most sense for him to do it. The only risky part of the plan is that they have to make sure that Higuchi knows that it's him. So while he'll have his face and voice obscured for the majority of the broadcast, they'll have to include a moment where they drop the frosted glass and, reveal his face.
Wow! Sounds exciting!
For who, Misa? Clearly not for Matsuda. But yeah, since they'll have to drop the glass in order for Higuchi to feel confident that it is, in fact, Taru Matsui spilling the beans, they pose the risk of, Well, I'll let Ryuzaki say it.
If Higuchi can kill by simply looking at someone's face, just like the second Kira, Matsuda will die.
And yeah, while the benefits are clear in the sense that they'll be able to monitor everything Higuchi does as he attempts to find out Matsui's real name, since they'll have eyes on him wherever he goes, it'll all kind of be pointless if he has the second Kira's ability of just needing to see someone's face in order to kill them. So, if that is the case, Matsuda would be fucked. But, as they go on to explain, the fact that he hasn't been killed yet is a good sign, especially considering the fact that Higuchi is actively pursuing Misa, who he believes to be the second Kira. Anyway, the good thing for Matsuda is that he has some time to decide, 2 or 3 days at least, as they need to wait and see if the deaths actually stop so that they can confirm that Higuchi is actually Kira. Plus, no one has a gun to his head, and he has every right to back out if he wants to. I mean, shit, I can't say that I'd have the testicular fortitude to willingly throw myself on the chopping block like that. But, then again, I'm no Matsuda, apparently.
I don't need 2 or 3 days to decide. I want to do this.
And I gotta give it to my boy. He does a lot of stupid shit, but damn it if this man isn't brave as hell, because shit, could not be me. Anyway, we're going to leave things on a high note as we head back to how to use it. First up, the dead god of death will disappear, but the death note will remain. The ownership of this death note is usually carried over to the next god of death that touches it, but it is common sense that it is returned to the great god of death. So, what? Who is the great god of death? I guess they mean the Shinigami king? I could see that being what they mean by that. But anyway, this seems straightforward enough. I mean, we saw the first part of this rule play out back in episode 12 when Jealous left his notebook behind after he unalived himself to save Misa. The same notebook which Rim then picked up for herself before ultimately giving it to Misa. As far as the last part, it's weird to say that it's common sense because it doesn't even appear to be common knowledge, because I've yet to hear a single Shinigami mention this fact, despite them all paying attention to what Ryuk is doing down in the human world. But whatever. Next up, only by touching each other's death note can human individuals who own the death note in the human world recognize the appearance or voice of each other's gods of death. Totally makes sense, and we've seen it happen before back in episodes 13 and 14. So, yeah. Anyway, after the break, we find ourselves at Midou's house, and upon Namikawa's arrival, he asks why the two of them are having a private meeting, and Shimono comes right out with,
Namikawa, tell me, who do you think is Kira?
Which is, a pretty loaded question, but we already know that Namikawa isn't stupid enough to just come out and answer it, so instead, he deflects, asking Shimono why he'd even want to know what he thinks, following it up by saying that, as far as he knows, either of them could be Kira, which I think is a fair response on his part. However, Midou tells him that Shimono can't be Kira because
he was the one who came crying to me about how he can't go along with Kira's crimes anymore.
And this makes Namikawa kind of chuckle, going on to say how risky that was, given the fact that Midou could have possibly been Kira. But something I want to point out is how rude Midou was just now, claiming that Shimoda came crying to him, which, while not super disrespectful, it's still one of the rudest things we've heard him say. And I feel like this is probably a much more accurate depiction of who he really is. And I'm not saying he's a bad person or anything, I'm just saying that he feels more comfortable saying something like that, given that he's confident that neither of them are Kira. I mean, as I said before, the situation during those meetings is one of a hostile nature, where they're all on edge, worried about saying the wrong thing to the wrong person and ending up dead as a result of it. Here, they can relax for the most part, which means speaking the way they normally would. But anyway, Shimono responds to Namikawa's comment by saying,
There's no way either of you would need to hold those stupid meetings, let alone with 7 others.
And given what limited information we have on the both of them, I would agree with that. For example, it's been established that Namikawa has a great deal of influence, not just with the Hattori thing, but it also appears as though he was the one to organize the whole thing with the police that ultimately ended with them discontinuing their investigation into Kira. And as far as Midou is concerned, we saw that he had compiled the research on ELF insurance on his own, meaning what benefit would he have in meeting with the others when he already felt confident about who should be killed without their input. So yeah, based on what we know about these dudes, Shimoda's comment makes a lot of sense.
We're all cooperating with these killings because we're afraid of Kira turning on us.
Yes! While it was obvious enough, it's still nice to have it actually confirmed by one of them. This shit is a straight-up hostage situation, and they've got no other recourse than to go along for the ride.
I mean, it's only a matter of time until the public finds out. And this isn't going to stop until that happens.
Huh. I actually never thought of it like that. Higuchi not only has them hostage, he also has them to use as scapegoats if the need ever arises. He could simply write all of their names down and have them admit to working with Kira before dying, making sure that they keep his name completely out of it. Now, that wouldn't work, obviously, given the cameras and whatnot, but only Namikawa knows about that. So Shimada saying that is actually really smart. That thought didn't even cross my mind. If shit ever hits the fan, then he has human sacrifices at the ready to take all of the blame. Anyway, Namikawa ends up asking Shimada who he thinks Kira is, and Shimada responds with,
Takahashi or Higuchi.
Now, for those of you who don't remember, Takahashi is this dude, really kind of inconsequential. His biggest moment was when Higuchi called him stupid and threatened to kill him. And funny thing about Higuchi calling him stupid,
Takahashi is just a decoy. Kira would make sure there are people less clever than him.
Higuchi wasn't lying when he said that. Takahashi is, apparently, less intelligent, and that's the point. Higuchi chose him for that exact reason. Which, don't get me wrong, is a smart play. The idea of surrounding yourself with people more intelligent than you, but also including someone dumber so that you don't look like the weakest link? Yeah, it's a smart play. But it just so happens that the people Higuchi surrounded himself with were smart enough to have figured that out.
Well, then it looks like we all know the truth already. It's Higuchi, isn't it?
And right they are. And I gotta admit, it's impressive that they figured it out. I mean, I imagine they had their suspicions for a long time, they just weren't able to act on it because being wrong could have meant life or death, so it only made sense to just roll with it. Anyway, Midou goes on to say that Higuchi is obsessed with money and success, which, I mean, tracks based on his own rhetoric.
Everything I could ever want. Money, power, and a beautiful wife.
Anyway, Namikawa goes on to add,
he always insults everyone around him and can't use his people well.
And that, too, tracks, which makes me wonder if, even if he wasn't Kira, would he still be insulting people in that meeting? I honestly just can't imagine someone being stupid enough to do that. Though, to be fair, the show has made it clear that he's definitely not the brightest person in the room. For example, in episode 20, Higuchi says,
So did we really pay $5 million for this report? He hasn't found out anything important about L, like his name or his face.
And the reason I point this out is because immediately after saying this, Oe points out the part about Coil noticing the fact that they only kill on the weekends, which was a very important piece of information for them to be made aware of. Because if the second best detective figured that out, then that means that L likely could too. Higuchi would have just looked right past that and kept doing the same shit. Hell, if I had to guess, it was probably shit like his inattention to detail that played a part in
why he was demoted from being head of the development department.
But yeah, Namikawa goes on to ask if he was the only other person they invited, and Midou replies by saying that they did invite Oe, but he ended up saying,
You can hold your stupid private meetings by yourself.
Which is both funny and logical. Like, I don't know if I'd want to be kikied up with them at their private meetings. That sounds like a recipe for smoke, and my boy don't want no smoke with Kira. I respect it. Anyway, Shimada then brings up the call that Namikawa received during one of their meetings. And to be fair, he did take note of Namikawa receiving that call back in episode 20. So, nice callback. Even Namikawa praises him on his attention to detail. But before Namikawa can answer, he receives another call from none other than the man himself. Light starts the call off by asking if Namikawa is alone, to which he says no. But when Light tells him to pretend that it's just a normal call again, Namikawa, apparently feeling himself a little bit, decides to flex.
I don't think there's any need for that. One of the people here with me was just expressing his suspicions about your last call.
Which feels a little ballsy, but then I guess he knows that he's not the target here, so he doesn't feel as threatened as he did previously. Anyway, when Shimada asks who's on the line, he comes right out and says,
It's L.
Which, as you can tell, shocks the both of them. Namikawa then goes on to speak on behalf of both of them by saying,
They'll choose to stand back and watch your face off with Kira, like I planned to.
And man, the flow of this conversation is going very differently than it did last time. In episode 20, Light had him against the ropes. Namikawa was panicking, but now he's all easygoing, looping people in without L's permission. And it gets even better because when Light tells Namikawa that he'll need his help in catching Kira tonight, this happens.
Then it's the end for Higuchi.
What? You know that it's him?
Based on your reaction, I'm now 100% certain that Higuchi is Kira.
Like, damn, that shit was smooth as hell. And the fact he's just laughing at him. I fuck with Namikawa, and apparently so does Misa.
Namikawa was pretty smart, huh?
No, that was just because Light messed up.
I mean, those two things are not mutually exclusive, Ryuzaki. Sure, Light messed up, but Namikawa also banked on that, and it worked out in his favor. Anyway, Light goes on to explain the plan, as well as the role Namikawa is expected to play in tonight's events. Once that's done, Namikawa relays the information to Shimada and Midou. Meanwhile, back at his house, Higuchi is living it up.
When I marry Misa Amane, I'll have the Shinigami eyes. With that power in my hands, Yotsuba will be under my control.
What? How does that change your situation at all? Like, legitimately, what does having her eyes do for you from a business perspective? You're saying Yotsuba will be under your control as a result of being with her, but who are you trying to kill at Yotsuba whose name you don't already have? Are you saying there are people in the company who have their identities hidden or something? Furthermore, if you're trying to kill people outside of Yotsuba, then, I mean, dude, you're rich. Stupid rich. So if you needed to find out information on someone, you would be more than capable of just having someone get that for you. Like, what? Also, again, whose name would you need to get that isn't easily accessible? I mean, outside of L, who Misa wouldn't be able to help you with anyway, as it stands, y'all are out here killing prominent businessmen, people whose names are likely a part of public records. I don't understand what Misa could really offer you that would make a substantial difference in what you're doing. But, okay, whatever you say, man. Anyway, as he sits on the couch laughing with Rim in the corner, kind of just wishing he'd shut the fuck up, he gets a call.
Higuchi, we've got a problem. Check out Sakura TV.
And thus, the plan is on its way, as Higuchi turns on the program and starts watching. Now, he's skeptical at first, as was expected, but when Namikawa explains that the individual in question mentioned overhearing a meeting between 8 people, well, let's just say that gets his attention.
Someone who knows about the meetings? Who is it?
So, the program continues with Matsuda spilling all of the tea, even bringing up the death of Hatsuri, or Mr. H as he refers to him. Anyway, as Higuchi watches on, contemplating as to who it might be, he gets his answer.
It's him!
And they play it well, with all of the people coming in to quickly hide his face as if that shit wasn't planned. But I mean, that's the point. It's gotta look like they messed up. And the way people seem to talk about Sakura TV, it doesn't seem all that unlikely that this could very well have been something they messed up. Anyway, Higuchi starts freaking out and making some questionable facial expressions. But yeah, he's curious as to how old Matsui could still be alive. Which, I mean, yeah, that's a fair question. Y'all saw this man die, or at least you thought you did. Namikawa then chimes in to provide some clarification, basically telling the events like they actually happened. Though, I gotta be honest, that'd be a hard pill to swallow if I were Higuchi. But you know what? To be fair, the more immediate concern is killing this man, so I could see why the details wouldn't concern him as much. Especially considering the fact that Higuchi goes on to think,
just to be careful, I went home that night and wrote his name in the notebook like it was written on his business card.
And hey, credit where credit is due. Good for him for being thorough about it. I mean, dude fell off of a building, but you still went home and wrote his name down for good measure. So, I mean, can't fault you for being too careful, but considering he's still alive and well, that must mean he gave y'all an alias. So, what you gonna do about that, Higuchi?
I have to kill him.
Well, yes, obviously, but how?
Misa knows his face, so if she's the second Kira, she should know what his real name is.
Smart move. Let's see how that works out for you.
It's him.
Not sending his ass straight to voicemail. Damn. Well, what you gonna do now, buddy?
Soon.
So, it looks like he's calling Midou, but it looks like our boys are a bit distracted by, Misa? Huh. Now that's interesting. So you're telling me that she has her own brand of makeup. Like, not that she's promoting someone else's makeup, she has her own makeup brand. Hold up, is Misa rich? Like, I've seen a lot of articles about how much celebrities make from their cosmetic lines, and I mean, if she's also starring in movies and modeling on top of that, then damn, girl, you out here making money. But, anyway, Higuchi calls Midou, who eventually answers.
Midou, why don't you call your father in the House of Counselors?
Have him stop this broadcast.
So at first, I thought this was an interesting option. I mean, if his dad has the ability to pull the program, then it would serve to give Higuchi more time to find out this guy's real identity and, you know, kill him properly this time around. However, Midou ends up saying that he doesn't think that's possible and follows it up with,
no one believes this program, so we'd only make ourselves look suspicious if we stop it.
And that's a really good point. How's it gonna look if this dude's dad calls to have this program taken down? People will wonder why, and he might very well tell them that his son asked. And hell, even if he doesn't, people might infer that anyway, especially since Matsuda has apparently mentioned Yotsuba by name.
He said that he continued to investigate Yotsuba up until now.
So yeah, it just really wouldn't be the right move. Anyway, Midou then goes on to say,
there shouldn't be anything to worry about. Everyone knows it's really Taro Matsui.
And that's when it clicks for Higuchi.
I'm the only one who knows that Taro Matsui isn't his real name.
Which means he has to stop freaking out and saying shit lest people become aware that he's Kira. Like, if they weren't already aware, this would be making him look a lot worse. I mean, both Midou and Namikawa were very calm, but he's here freaking the hell out, when in actuality he needs to stay calm too, at least when talking to them. And so he does just that, promptly ending the call after agreeing with Midou. The next call Higuchi makes is to Mogi, who, as you remember, is acting as Misa's manager right now. This call kicks off the start of what Ryuzaki calls Phase 2.
Moji, where's Misa?
No, Mr. Higuchi, pleasure to hear from you.
It's weird enough when Mogi usually talks, but there's something about this persona that's just a little unnerving. But if nothing else, it shows that he's got range. Anyway, he goes on to explain that Misa is on vacation right now and won't be available until sometime tomorrow. However, Higuchi, for obvious reasons, doesn't have the luxury of waiting until tomorrow, so he instead tries a different route and gets in touch with the head of Misa's agency. And this is how he gets on the phone with him.
This is Higuchi from Yotsuba. That manager's real name isn't Taro Matsui.
It's like, damn, dude, you're really just jumping right into it. Like, no hey, no how you doing, just randomly spouting out that some dead manager's name isn't what it actually is. But hey, look, dude is pressed, so while I'm giving him a hard time, I also completely understand the urgency of the situation and why he's acting like this. Anyway, Ryuzaki goes on to comment about how he's starting to panic, which, yes, I would definitely agree with that sentiment.
Why the hell can't you remember the names of the people you hire?
But yeah, the conversation doesn't go exactly as Higuchi wants, but he is given the opportunity to find the information that he's looking for, with the president telling him that he can go to their office and pull Matsui's file to get his real name. Which is kind of ridiculous, but then dude is so beyond stressed right now that none of that really matters. He's not thinking straight, and that's the point. They want him to panic. They want him to act illogically so that he'll fuck up and show them how he kills. Anyway, with the president giving him the information that he needs to get into the office, Higuchi heads out, death note and pistol in tow, ready to do whatever needs to be done in order to kill our boy Matsuda once and for all. As Higuchi speeds from his house, we see Weddy pulling out of what we can assume is the van or trailer we saw her in earlier and tailing Higuchi as he heads towards the Yoshida Productions main office.
I'm not giving up until I have everything.
And it's interesting that he's still looking towards a future wherein he has everything he wants, when in reality, it's looking like he'll be lucky to make it through the night without being exposed. But yeah, as he speeds down the highway, the pressure of the entire situation building up within him, he starts to crack. And I love how Rim is just in the back, looking almost concerned that this dude might actually be broken, which, fair. And yeah, the laughter continues as we pan into the cityscape, letting us know that we're in for one hell of a night. And roll credits. Anyway, that's the end of this video, but before we wrap this one up, I wanted to take a second to thank the folks who subscribed to the Patreon last week, because I really do appreciate the additional support. Thank you to all of our admirable assessors and invaluable investigators for signing up, and I also wanted to give a special thanks to both The Best and I Am the Blonde Asshole for being our two remarkable researchers. And lastly, praise be to our one and only official overanalyzer, Croy Raiden, for their contribution to the channel. All of y'all are awesome, and again, I thank you so much for signing up. But yeah, if you liked this video, then consider dropping a like. If you really liked it, then consider subscribing. And if you just loved it and want to see more sooner, then consider joining the Patreon. You could even wind up being featured in one of these videos. Anyway, that's it for this time. Until next week, friends. Peace.